promotes, that was a sort of a joke, promotes the use of reason and science in the search for and commitment to an ethical life that benefits all humanity. We believe that personal inquiry, responsibility, and accountability are the best basis for decision-making. Our weekly forums seek to broaden our understanding of ethics and human nature, and our congregational, I always say congregational community encourages us to share diverse opinions, friendship, and camaraderie. We welcome everyone to share in our journey. And if you'd like more information, it would be odd because you already know everything. But you could see me or any of us, really. You could see yourselves. And that would be cool. Due to the ongoing pandemic, masks are recommended but not required. And if you would like to wear one, that's fine. So now, if we have a microphone, we'll open the floor to joys and concerns. Who has a joy and or a concern? Gretchen.
Well, the latest news on my niece's house, it's going to be done maybe at the first of the year. Though the builder told them, you better put your Christmas tree up where you are right now. But it's getting real close. They should have the electric turned on momentarily and carpets are in and all that stuff. So then they'll just have to move, which is always fun. But it'll be interesting having them right next door.
All right. Anybody else? Solomon.
Yes, because I'm always excited. My daughter and my son, which is a weird thing to say still, since they just got married in July, will be here for Christmas and be spending time with them, their mom, and I always enjoy that.
Wait till people start calling you grandpa.
All right.
Or Joyce? Ken?
Yes.
Well, it's nothing so joyful. I just no concern because I've been very depressed a couple of months. That's why I've missed a lot of the meetings, and I really wanted to put myself here today to hear all of you talk. So,
Glad that you're here.
Glad to have you back.
Mike has a.
John and I are going to Australia and New Zealand on the 11th.
You'll have to bring us news from down under.
Solstice is Wednesday at 4:48, but today at 5:05 in the year of our Lord, 2022, that's Jesus, Hanukkah starts. So have a happy, holly jolly Hanukkah.
All right.
Thank you. Oh, Jennifer.
Jennifer.
I can't compete with Australia and New Zealand, but I would like to share joy. I am semi-surprising my daughter for her Christmas break from school. We are going to DC. We're going to spend a couple nights there and we're going to tour all the different museums and just hang out. Apparently it's pretty happening in DC. Christmas Day, of course, a lot of things are closed, so we're just going to visit family. So thank you.
And this is Chris. I'm going to be going with my wife, Jane, to California tomorrow, and we'll be there for 10 days, coming back on the 29th. So that'll be very much fun. It's sort of a family gathering, including my son-in-law's mother and brother and sister. So should be fun.
Good morning, America.
Any other joys and concerns and or concerns? All right. So we will move on to opening and closing words. I would like to introduce myself as having opening and closing words today. I missed the poetry session last week, and as a consequence, I felt what a better time than today to subject you all to a semi-original work that I have composed. It's called The Physics of Macbeth. I subtitled it Improving Shakespeare. So, What now on Mars, 20 light seconds away? Here upon the bank and shoal of time, we jump to life to come. How fast to pass the time? A second takes but 1 second. An astronaut by Earth near the speed of light at the same moment could, on looking at the hour, say that it was earlier or later upon the foot of motion. If you can look into the seeds of time and say which grain will grow and which will not, speak then to me who neither beg nor fear your favors. An electron bounces off an atom. We know not which way it will go. So Macbeth to the weird sisters, more shall they speak. For now I am bent to know strange things I have heard that will be to hand. As physics say, must be acted ere they be scanned. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow creeps in this pretty pace from day to day. To the last syllable of recorded time, I better put these on, and all your yesterdays have lighted fools, for only the memory of it can be found a thing called time. Life's but a waking shadow, a poor player that struts and frets upon the hour, frets its hour upon the stage, and then is heard no more. Without memory, no future, no past. Out, out, brief candle, get thee gone tomorrow. There the grown serpent lies, the worm that's fled, hath nature that in time will venom breed, no teeth for the present. Get thee gone tomorrow, for today we shall hear ourselves once again. That's it. Thank you. So I would like now to introduce, I can see you, our speaker. Chris Kamen is going to present a program today about predictions, about the future, about the past, about together in some mysterious way. Chris, come. All right, unplug.
Here we go. I think I cut down the front lights a little bit. Funny enough, the front lights are at the bottom of it. Yeah. It's all depending on how you. Uh-oh. Wake up. There we go. There we go. All right. Oh, in case anybody's interested, the Charleston Jazz Festival is in April next year. So that's on my agenda for fun stuff. Okay. This is not going to be a real slideshow. It's just a series of PDF slides. And of course, like Fred, I should have brought my glasses with me, but let's see if I can make this bigger. Oh, it doesn't want to do that. So let me take this. Okay. Okay. So in January of 2022, I sent out a survey and of 14 questions, and we asked our membership to make predictions about what they thought would happen. And so today is the day that I present those findings and provide some comments about those findings. So the first question was, will the Supreme Court overturn Roe versus Wade? 16 people responded. And as you can see here, we were right on the mark. Yes, they did, by a margin of 6-3. Some of the comments here I'll read below. It's settled law. I hope I'm wrong. But I have there's a small chance two conservative justices will vote to uphold it. I hate to think this, but the statements made by the Supreme Court trend this way. I won't read all the others. I do think it was interesting that somebody leaked the decision before it was actually formally announced, which I think is actually pretty cool. I think there's a little bit too much of a respect for the Supreme Court, and so I'm glad to see. And apparently, it looks like Alito may have also leaked a prior decision back 10 or 12 years before on the Hobby Lobby case. Religious organizations were told that that case will go their way. So, okay. Number two, I'll try and drag this out so I'm not finished in 10 minutes. Will the Republican Party take control of both houses of Congress? In this case, the majority of us said, no, they will not do that. And of course, that was correct. They did not take over both houses. Some of the comments, as you see, is que sera, sera. Maybe the Senate, but not the House. Har, har, har. Much will depend on 2022 events, but the odds are that the Democrats will hold the House. I doubt they'll hold the Senate. They will likely stay the same as current. Republican Party will take the Senate, but Democrats will keep the House. Be very afraid. Well, the comments were all wrong, but yeah. It was in January of the year. Yes, John. Yeah, they were definitely predicting a red wave, and I'm really glad to see that they were so confident that they would be elected that they ran idiots, and that thereby ensured that we would keep the Senate. Will Stephen Breyer retire at the end of this Supreme Court term? And it looks like the majority of us said no. So we were not too wise on that one. Some of the comments, as you see, are ego enough said. I think Breyer learned from Ginsburg, and I agree with the person who said that. I am so glad that Breyer did not commit a Ginsburg on this. And of course, Kenny McConnell hold off a nomination for 3 years. Well, if he were the majority leader of the Senate, yes, he could. And I bet he would if he had the opportunity. One wonderful thing that came out of this is that Kenjati Jackson was his replacement, and she's the first African-American woman to serve on the Supreme Court. So we not only had one victory, we had a great victory after that. Will the Senate Democrats alter the rules for the filibuster? Well, it looks like we all said no, they would not alter the rules. And in fact, they didn't alter them, not even to preserve voting rights, and I'm going to cover that later. Some of the comments were, as you see, they are an uncertain future. I guess the filibuster rules are. They might do it next term, not in 2022. I hope someone will end the filibuster, but unlikely. So we were pretty smart on that one. Will the coronavirus, COVID-19, become less harmful in 2022 and more like the seasonal flu? Now, this question was probably not worded very well because it asked an and question, this and this. So for an and question to be wrong, you only have to have one of them be wrong, even if the other is true. So we said that yes, it would become that way. So in red, you'll see what I actually did research on. It said, according to the CDC, COVID deaths declined significantly in March, leveled off for the rest of the year, and that it remains sort of leveled off. But morbidity for people of age 65 and over remains relatively high. It remains the third leading cause of death in the US. So I say this is a mixed result here. It did ease off, but I don't think it became as common as the flu. So we were sort of half right on that one, half wrong. Yeah, who said that? Yeah, there are no names associated with that. This is a Google poll, so we don't have to worry about embarrassing anybody. Let's see. I'm going to go on to the next one. Will inflation continue to rise, level off, or drop from present levels? Well, we all seem to think it would level off. But according to Statistica, the inflation rose to a high of 9.1% in June, but since August, inflation has eased to 7.1%. So it looks like our collective wisdom was that it would level off, and it even dropped. So perhaps you could say we were wrong, but I say level off is good enough. Some of the comments, no reason for it to keep going up. Most seems to be caused by COVID events. And at that point, we didn't know that Russia would invade Ukraine and cause other problems. So we'll go on to that. Will Russia invade the Ukraine? It was split. We could not come to a decision on that. And obviously he did. Someone wisely said cost benefit analysis will prevent this. So you were wrong. Too risky for Russia, wrong again. And Ms. Merkel will stop Putin. Well, Ms. Merkel did not stop Putin. So so it looks like we're right on that one. So will Donald Trump face any legal consequences for his role in the January 6th uprising? The majority of us said no, he would not. And certainly he has not to this point in time. Yeah, I like the Russian word for no, niet. And that to me is a conflation of not yet. So I'd say niet. Lots of comments on this one. Money and lawyers will prevent this, but not due to any action of Congress. Unfortunately, the man seems to elude justice. I agree with that. The laws of the U.S. are worthless in this case, and Donald Trump will automatically be brought down the same way Al Capone was financially. And I think that is probably going to be correct. What he did with his taxes will end up doing him in. Now, the next two predictions, we weren't doing very well on this. Will Sherry Beasley be elected to the U.S. Senate? We said 50% said yes. Well, Sherry Beasley lost to Ted Budd, 47% to 50.5% respectively. Only 51% of the eligible voters in North Carolina cast their ballots. So she would have won if we had had a higher turnout. And I'll say Chatham County, where I live, had one of the highest turnouts in the state. Chatham County has been consistently high for many, many years about that. And I'm quite proud that we remain that way. Comments on number 9. Let's see. My political prognostication sucks. I'll keep my fingers crossed. And this may be wishful thinking. I will celebrate when North Carolina elects its first Black anything at the state or national level. And I hope that doesn't include the current lieutenant governor when he runs for office in 2024. I really hope we don't have to deal with that. But that would be the first Black governor we've ever had. Will Stacey Abrams be elected governor of Georgia? We overwhelmingly thought yes. Well, she lost to Kemp 45.9% to 53.4% respectively. She actually got fewer votes than Warnock in the general election, but even Warnock's stats were still less than Kemp's. So even if everybody that voted for Warnock had voted for Abrams, she still would not have won that election. And in Georgia, who passed all these laws trying to stifle turnout was 90%. So that's pretty incredible. That's probably the only reason why, well, never mind. So that's pretty incredible. If North Carolina had gotten 90%, I won't make any predictions. Let's see. Comments, same as number 9. Not enough progressives in Georgia. That's what I would say about North Carolina too, but maybe someday. Which of these voting rights bill will be passed? The Freedom to Vote Act or the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act? Well, 43% had the John Lewis Voting Rights Advancement Act. Well, however, nothing was passed. And why was it not passed? Because our good friends, Kirsten Sinema and Joe Manchin, did not want to take this occasion to overturn such a long established tradition. So I hope they're proud of their stance and the fact that we did not get any significant voting rights legislation passed. And looks like with the current configuration, with new configuration of the Senate and the House, we won't see anything new happening there for some time. 12, will Nancy Pelosi step down as leader of her party in the House if Republicans take control in November? We were very accurate on this. We predicted that with 100% accuracy. Well, they did take control of the House. Yeah. The question might be, would she have retired if the Democrats had held on to the House? That's the question. Actually, I personally will say I'm glad to see her go. I think the Democrats have too many old people in leadership, but Nancy Pelosi has been, I've enjoyed the Republicans hating her as much as I can't stand Mitch McConnell. So let's see. But she paved, in so doing, she paved the way for the first African-American ranking minority leader. So again, a retirement by a wise Democrat or a liberal opened the door to a minority. So minority leadership. So excellent, excellent. Let's see. There has to be transition. She has eternal life. I like that one. So you heard it here, okay? Let's see. Will Joe Biden announce that he is not running for president in 2024? 50% of us said he will not announce that he is not running. And so again, yet, not yet. Yes. Yes, that's. Well, these are predictions about what he would do. I probably should have worded that differently. But yeah, we were predicting in 2022 what he would do. And that could be a discussion question for today if we want. Let's see. Kamala doesn't seem to be stepping up as hoped. He promised to do this and Harris is capable. Okay. Here's a discussion question. Will racial tensions increase, decrease, or stay the same? We basically were split on this between increase and decrease, and actually stay the same. We're split between increase and staying the same, and only a few people thought it would decrease. Way to quantify this kind of question. So I really probably should not have asked it, or I should have asked it in a quantifiable way, like, will the number of racial hate acts rise or fall or stay the same, you know? And so I went to the Southern Poverty Law Center, and they talked about hate groups, but they didn't really break it out into race. I think we have seen a lot more anti-Semitic attacks being made, violent attacks being made on people. So that's not a good sign. Yeah, I think that's true too. I think they can't quite get consistent reporting data. Some of the comments were social justice will prevail, but anger will persist. I decided to say little hope of decreasing tensions. America cannot and does not want to solve its racial problems. That's interesting. I thought, yeah, okay. So no good answer. What do you think? Okay, those were all the questions that I had asked. There were some other comments that were made. And so, for example, fusion reactor technology will have a successful test, and it did. So hooray, that's pretty amazing. Who said that? Stand up and take a bow. All right. quantum computing and mathematical advances will result in awesome advances in engineering, medicine, weather predictions, but also state-sponsored hacking of financial and military networks. I didn't really try to quantify that. I don't know if how well that turned out. Any thoughts? No. Number 3, gun manufacturers will face massive lawsuits. I didn't see that happening, although I do think Remington settled out of court in a pretty big case. And I think California did pass a law that similar to the Texas law regarding abortions that would allow a third party to sue a gun manufacturer for violence, for gun act violence in California. So that's to be interesting to see if that's acted on. CRISPR technology will result in new editable. I thought, are my glasses on right or not? Edible vaccines, which will be effective, cheap, and easy to produce and distribute, such as in yoga drinks. So, Fred, did that turn out the way you predicted? Oh, really? Oh, okay. All right. And people, wow. There you go. So if all these are yours, Fred, then people will stop paying attention to your predictions. So is that true? Is that true? Someone predicted the Green Bay Packers would win the Super Bowl. I meant to put this a comment in here. They weren't even in the Super Bowl. So that person was definitely wrong. Climate events will become more severe. Governments will take more actions, but won't keep up with the trend. I think climate events did were more severe. I don't know if governments will take more actions. I'm just pretty sure they haven't. That's probably true too. What I thought was interesting was that there's been this new agreement to have a fund that helps countries who have been harmed by climate change, such as floods and droughts and things, that would help them recoup some of the damages or prevent such things in the future. I thought that was pretty cool. Unfortunately, this even though there's a slider here, when I saved this from Google Forms, it did not allow me to keep the slide. Well, actually, when I printed it, it did not allow me to do that. So I don't have any others. So how did we do overall? Well, out of 14, we got 7 right, 3 wrong, 3 ties. That is where we couldn't make a decision, and 1 question that couldn't be answered, which is number 14 about race relations. So 7 out of 13 is 53.8% right. So I don't know if anybody wants to bank on that, or yeah, it is hard to predict the future, and yeah. Yes, give yourselves a round of applause. Slightly above chance, so there you go. We never said we were ethical leaders, but we don't predict the future. That much I can say. And so I'll open the floor to comments. People can comment about any of these things, and I won't probably have much of a response. But I see Kent has his hand up, and he's going to wait for the mic so that.
Well, excuse me, I don't know how Chatham County votes. You referred to it. So would you describe Chatham County?
How can we what?
How would you describe the voting patterns in Chatham County?
Well, they've been pretty pro Democrat county for a long time. The last time the county went solidly Republican for anything was in 2010, which is when 3 of the Democratic county commissioner seats were lost to Republicans. 2010, as you well know, was a red wave caused in part by some very smart Republicans and Citizens United. And when the Supreme Court, and I bet that was leaked to the people who with the money, because when that money hit the fan, a lot of people went down. I still remember Representative Bob Etheridge, who had voted for the Affordable Care Act. He was voted out. A lot of Democrats, in fact, it wiped out, they said, Democratic leadership in the House for the next 10 years, because there are all sorts of Democrats who could have stepped into positions of leadership, but that basically destroyed them. Yes, we're going to pass the baskets, take this quick commercial
Chris?
break. that we are an all-volunteer organization. We receive no money from big funders such as Elon Musk or other people like that. So thanks to you for your money that you put in the basket on Sundays for your pledges and your payments.
Hey,
Um,
Chris,
Yes. Okay.
sorry, we were late. So what was the question that could not be answered?
The question that wasn't really quantifiable was about race relations. Will race relations get better, worse, or stay the same?
And
We-
thermodynamics says that it should get worse.
You think it should get worse, should have gotten worse.
Thermodynamically, it should get worse. Yeah, exactly. So it has to get worse.
Okay.
Yeah. So we were split between increase and stay the same. So we certainly, most of us didn't think it would get better. So I guess, depending on your outlook, I'm pretty sure they didn't get better. Yes.
I
Gretchen.
just wanted to make a couple more points about Chatham County's voting. The heavier population of Chatham is in the eastern part of the county, which tends to be very blue. The
Mhm.
western part of the county is definitely red, but there's fewer of them. So there's a lot of people that are really mad about that they're, talking we should split the county and stuff, but oh well, I'm glad it's the way it is.
Yeah. Yeah.
More populated, and I think the eastern part of the county are more the people that have moved down from Chapel Hill or from Raleigh. So that's more, which are blue counties, whereas the western part is definitely the more rural and religious and all that stuff.
What's
So
interesting about Chatham County is that this has been true for a couple hundred years, that the western end, including Pittsburgh, was always seen as sort of the more educated group people, and in the west was sort of perceived as the more farming, working class people. So that trend is held for quite a long time, and I don't see it changing. The one thing that is positive is that we have a Hispanic county commissioner, but only because we have all county voting for our commissioners. We have districts, they have to run from that district, but we have county-wide elections. I think if we actually had district elections, we would probably not have the 5 Democrats we have on the county commissioners now.
I'm curious to know if the person who opposed the prediction about fusion is here.
Yes,
Oh, there he is.
Fred.
So I heard on the radio that probably NPR, it's all I listen to, that, okay, yeah, so the Americans have caught up with China, and I forget what the other country is, but you never hear that discussed. The only thing I hear discussed is, oh, we can now, I don't even have the lingo to discuss this, but I just think it's really interesting that the news seems to have not put it in context. So.
Fred?
Well, I'd just respond that our news in general is always, I think, biased. I think any news from any country, anywhere, is usually biased in some way or another. I was around one news story in my entire life that made national news. This was the Baby M case in New York City when I was living there years ago. You may not remember it.
No.
But it made national news, and the stuff that came out in the story was really very different from what I heard from the actual people who worked in the building that I worked in and were involved in it, had told us what happened. And so the details are irrelevant right now, and I don't really remember them either. This was 30 years ago or so. But so I think you have to take news with a grain of salt pretty much always. Yeah.
All right. Yes.
I've to tell you that it was a kidnapping case, and it's a long story.
The thing is about fusion in the 70s, fusion was 20 years in the future. And it's still 20 years in the future, and people are concerned it'll always be 20 years in the future. They got more energy out than they put in for a few seconds. And the longest they've gone is like 30 seconds. So it's going to be a very long time before they have big fusion power plants, or you start up your fusion car and drive around. It'll be a long time.
Yeah. They used lasers, and it was in a little canister, and they shot the lasers at it and it sort of blew up. But they got more energy out, as Mike said, than they put in. But what they're not telling you is, and that's in the physics of that reaction. What they're not telling you is the lasers they used drained the power grid way more than the energy they got out.
Oh, wow.
Let's see. Atish.
I mean, that is quite right. I mean, they only were able to sustain a fusion reaction for 30 seconds, 15 seconds. Yeah, because then after that, you cannot sustain it. And secondly, the containment becomes a problem. So whether they put it in a can or a paper bag doesn't really matter. As Conrad said, it is years into the future. I mean, in my opinion, the breeder reactor technology probably will come online before the fusion. It's a breeder reactor where you start with a particular fissile material, and then the byproducts of that fissile reaction are also fissile material. So it keeps on breeding more and more fissile material until it all cascades down to lead, which is the end of that any nuclear reaction. I'm sorry?
Actually, let's keep this focused on
Question at a
this.
time.
All right.
Yeah, I'm gonna say there's another reactor technology that does not generate tremendous amounts of radioactive waste. And I think it's thorium. Is that right? Who can? Thorium. Ah, okay. Yeah. So that technology I think is very promising, way sooner probably than fusion. But fusion is like the holy grail. If we get that, we've got basically free energy for the rest of our needs. So, Lou.
So I was here January when we did these predictions, and I remember there was somebody sitting here that was predicting that the Webb telescope was going to make all sorts of new information coming, and going along with your fusion and costing more power, because the lasers had to use electricity to power themselves, and that's where, but I saw something very frightening on YouTube where there's now a new movement saying that the Webb telescope is disproving the Big Bang. Because what they found was that there seems to be something here before the Big Bang. That doesn't mean the Big Bang didn't happen the way but they are twisting it. So again, like you said, we've got to be careful when we're looking at how science is reported, because who's reporting it and do they actually understand?
Well, I will make a prediction that the Big Bang Theory will be debunked sometime in the next 500 years. I won't be around to witness it, obviously, but to me, I can't wrap my head around, oh, there's nothing at all, then all of a sudden there's something. I just can't wrap my head around that. And to me, the whole idea of the multiverse, of there being multiple universes, makes way more sense. Of course, where they come from, hey, I don't really care where they came from. In fact, to me, it makes more sense that they've always existed than it does to say, oh, way back when they weren't around at all, and all of a sudden, poof, it happened. So that's my prediction. And we have some hands going up. I have generated some enthusiasm here.
Mike.
Yeah, there's no evidence for multiverses or strings or super strings or brains or any of this
Did you
stuff.
say brains?
Brains is a string.
Oh, membranes. Okay, I
String
thought you meant
point
brains.
brain. BRANES.
Okay.
There's all this stuff is hypothetical. It's just, it's not even, it's as Jeremy said it's not even wrong. This stuff is not even physics.
Yeah.
It's just hypothetical anyway. But as far as we can tell, it sure looks like there was a big bang. Everything is receding from us. And there's been a lot of astronomy that supports that. Now you talk to Penrose or somebody can speculate. That's again, how did a big bang happen? And there's even more speculation. What was it before the big bang, which they're mentioning? But yes, it sure looks like there was a big bang. And
Yeah.
and that's all you can go with
All right.
in science. Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, do you have your?
Well, I remember in the early 50s, they said that nuclear energy from fission and dividing the atom was going to be too cheap to meter. And so that didn't quite work out because of the cost technology. I know there's some technology, you may know what it is, that Bill Gates has invested in, where they use existing waste, radioactive waste to generate power, and they're trying to build those things. Maybe somebody knows more about it.
Yeah. We certainly know how to generate waste. I'll say that. That could be that could be considered a renewable energy. 13. Well, Joe Biden announced he is not running for president in 2024. So, and that was a 2022 prediction about 2024. Yeah, yeah. So one question I have for you, well, two questions I have. Do you want to do this again in January, or has that cow been milked so bad that we need to hold off for a couple more years? You want to do it again?
I'd say we were 53%. We need to do it again and prove that wasn't a fluke.
That's true. In fact, what we could do, we could take bets. Well, when we do it in January, we can take a bet. Someone will predict whether we'll do better, the same, or
worse.
worse than we did this year. So we'll put that as one of the questions.
You want, hang on a second. Can you repeat that?
I said one way to improve this, the prediction statistics is to do it in late December 2023.
That's right. Yes, yes. Hindsight's 2020. So, but that's
Yeah.
cheating. So, all right. What about? I'm curious. What do y'all think about the racial situation in America? Do you think racial tensions, and by that racial, I have a problem when we start talking about. Well, racial only means black and white. And in fact, races don't exist as we know in terms of biology, genetics, but they certainly exist as cultural phenomenon. So I'm curious, do you think things have gotten better or worse or the same? And I'll just let that be my final question before I exit right. Solomon.
You'll well, we've got to start.
Overall, it has probably leveled off. We may hear more about one group than the other because previous year Asians were the group, anti-Semitism this year, blacks the year before that. And my sense is that based on what we hear, statistics may say something different, is that there's a sort of leveling off. There's been a shift, but I think it's kind of a racial wash in a way.
With the Supreme Court
Gonna-
actually having a couple of cases having to do with affirmative action, maybe there's only one case, but it looks like they will have a chance to axe that completely. Should be interesting to see what happens there. So
I think I had my hand up
Sure.
first. I got the mic. Yeah.
I've got the power.
The point I would make is that I think a lot of the tension that we've had in the past several years had a lot to do with police violence and the reaction to it. And I think that police departments, while they are not necessarily significantly improving in their outlook on things, may be a little more aware that they got to watch their steps at least in public. So it may lead to a decrease.
In fact,
Now, I'm
I've
not sure who was first.
I've read that police go ahead.
Linda.
Well, I've had this theory for years, like decades, that it's a slightly optimistic that as soon as all the old white men die, that things will improve.
Thanks, Linda.
Oh. Present company, accepted.
Okay, thank you, thank you. You're still on my friends list, Linda, so it's okay.
We've got one that hasn't.
It just seems like me, looking at it all the years I've been around, that seem like with the racial issues, seem like every time we take 2 steps forward, we take 1 step back. But what gives me hope is the young people are much less racially oriented, much less racist, and also much less homophobic. Back in my day, that wasn't even an issue. You just didn't do it or didn't come out. I think the future, the ones that are coming up, the young people, and there's more and more of them, as they replace the old fogies, it's going to get better and has been over the past generation. So you just got to keep going and wait. It'll get better.
So I'm divided, because this issue, if you don't have statistics, if you don't have
Exactly.
verifiable, this is really, it's opinion.
Mhm.
And that brings me back to years ago, I was teaching English, high school English in South Florida, and we were doing the book Roll of Thunder, Hear My Cry, which if nobody knows it, check it out. It's a great book. And at the time I was a Baha'i, so the idea of one race, one thing, and equality and all that was very much the center of my teaching. And so I put forward, do we think that, racism is still around? And everybody in my classroom said, oh, we don't need to worry about it anymore. It's gone. And I looked around my classroom and I said, let me ask you a couple questions. I said, has anybody ever been followed by a security guard in a store? Every single hand that went up was an African-American male.
Wow, wow.
None other. Then I asked, have you ever been, because this was South Florida, so everybody goes to South Beach and all that. But anyways, so I said, how many people have ever been in a neighborhood outside of their own that they've been stopped by cops and asked for their ID? The same hands went up.
Wow.
Just African-American males. And they're all looking around the room and they're saying, Mr. Marvin, what is this? And I said, well, it may not be as in your face, but we still have to be on the lookout for it because it is still there.
Yeah.
So that's the perception that I'm worried about.
Yeah, let me respond real quick. I think that if we repose this question, I might break it down into several other questions, specifics such as, will the amount of police killings of Black people go up, down, or stay the same in 2023? That would be one way to quantify it. And I would look for other ways to quantify it, because you're right. It's just the overall question that I asked was just too subjective in terms of how you feel about it and how you would answer it, and you can't evaluate it. I'm so yeah, agreed.
Right. Whenever you talk of race relation, it is always with respect to black and white. I don't know whether I think I agree with Solomon. His solemn prediction that it has sort of reached an equilibrium. That black-white sort of tensions have reached an equilibrium. It may go up a little, down a little, but there's not going to be any humongously different changes. But what nobody's talking about is the tension between the minority communities. And that, I predict, is going to get worse as these communities try to assert their position in the in the United States, whether it be in the body politic or civilian life or so forth. That is going to be and it already is bad. I mean, it is not good. I mean, they all claim to sit around the far side singing Kumbaya. That is not true.
Well, the ending of Title II, I consider to be anti-immigrant and perhaps anti-Latinx sentiments. One senator was saying, well, we need people to come here who want to work, which implies those people who are at the border don't want to work. So that kind of trope is still active. And Jennifer has her hand up.
I'll just give my thoughts on it. I feel like what happens is that we move from more covert to more overt to covert racial issues, right? So people learn not to say the N-word. They learn not to be anti-Semitic in public. They learn to say things a certain way so that it's covered in in a way, coverted in a way that you can't really say it's racist. And so I think that's what happens. That's why kids don't recognize what it looks like on the street. It's why people feel like it's kind of gone away because the police are not beating people anymore. But then there are people who go to work, right, and they figure that they get treated certain ways because, for some reason they're not trusted. Or I can say I have enjoyed online shopping because I got tired of being followed in the store. So it's one of those things where it's like, yes, you can say that it's not overtly there, but it's definitely there covertly. And I think Atisha's right. The racism between minorities is more so aligning to white supremacy and anti-Blackness. There are people who come to this country and immediately know, I am not to be with Black people. I am to get as close to white people as I possibly can because that is what is acceptable and that's what I'm to do. And it creates this slurry of hatred amongst minority groups. And I'll give you an example. My daughter, who's only 12, we thought we had done all that we can to try to protect her as much as we could from just being treated as an other. When she first started going to school, one of her big things is that she wanted to ride the school bus. She's like, I want to ride the school bus like everybody else. I can't wait. I want to go outside. And her first day of going to school, we were so excited. She got on the school bus. The first week of her riding the school bus, she came home because a Hispanic girl told her that she cannot sit next to her because she's not pink.
Wow.
So we have to understand that she's not pink. So it's becoming more coverted. And I'm hopeful for youth, but I absolutely see how youth are corrupted with this as well. They may not have the Bull Connor, mindset or words, but they definitely have things like people who are lazy coming over the border. They definitely have things like, Black people are always in trouble. Black doll babies are, not as pretty. Black children are always bad in school. So there are things that are being taught that are definitely more covert than what we've seen in the past. So I'll just say that.
There have actually been so many interesting comments that I kept having in my head all these responses to a bunch of comments. My first comment is actually coming back to something Kent said about kids, and some kids are learning. My neighborhood is pretty diverse because there's a lot of houses. There's some houses where people own, but there's a lot of houses where people rent. So we have pretty wide variety of races in the neighborhood. And I watch these kids and they don't seem to care, which is good. My next door neighbor's son, who's 15, his very best friend, he's white, his very best friend is African-American, and that's sort of positive. But then, of course, Blue with his example of saying, who's been followed in the stores, raise your hand, this sort of thing. And of course, part of what he was doing was using literature. And that worries me right there because of these people who are trying to get rid of really important literature. The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison is a really important book, but there's a lot of people who are attempting to ban it. So between banning books and institutional racism, which is not personal, and I think that's why people don't see it as much, and that's why people don't like to admit it, who still don't admit it. It's easier to hide. It's easier not to notice. It is more covert, but it's very real, and it's going to take a lot more effort to overcome.
I'm going to comment too. We've also got politicians and celebrities in this country advocating policies that are very, very counterproductive in very, very loud voices. And you all know who they are. So, but I think that's a symptom of the problem of this covert type of institutionalized racism, because when they make these calls, they get responses. And that's the problem.
With all due respect, I think that blaming primarily old white men who are dying is missing the point, because it's racism for a lot of different groups. Recently, I read about the conflict in the LA City Council, where the Latinos were really trashing the blacks, which are for control of. So there's a lot from different sides. And I think minority competition is one area. I don't know if it's going to get better or worse, but
to me, the rise in anti-Semitism is of concern, and it seems that the march in Charlottesville, Virginia, Jews will not replace us. It seems like that really seems to be attracting a lot of hatred. That I'm sort of surprised it hasn't been directed toward blacks, but of course we had the mass killing. What was up in New York of the kid who went there was it a Walmart, who went there to kill as many black people as possible because that's where he would find a lot of black people. So that kind of thing is not, obviously hasn't gone away, and I don't think it will anytime soon. Go ahead.
Maura and then Linda.
I just have a very brief response to Kent. I think that any of these racisms is obviously a bad thing. But the problem with the white supremacy racism is white people who are being very racist are already in the power position. So their racism has, in some ways, a greater effect. And that would be my issue with it. But the other thing I thought of, Chris gave me a flashback to a movie. The Blues Brothers came out in 1980. And I don't know how many people here have seen it, but if you haven't, you should, because it's great and has awesome music. But there is a scene where these Nazi people are standing there and they're chanting. You've got all these angry people because they're saying rude things, and they're saying, white people, the Jews are using the blacks against you. And of course, the movie was a comedy, but it was making fun of all these things. But the most interesting thing to me about that scene is the actor who played that role of the Nazi was actually a Jewish man. So.
Oh.
Linda?
I just wanted to make the comment that I think racism is a lot more complicated than we think. When I lived in Boston, I had a friend who was from Jamaica, and she married a white guy, and they had 3 boys who were like the perfect blend of their skin tones. And she was telling me a story about dropping off her youngest. He was in elementary school, and no, she was picking him up after school, and he was having a fight with a little black girl. And as he got, right before he got in the car, his parting shot was, well, and you're black. And he gets in the car and the mother says, you're black too. So what was that supposed to mean, And she was black. So that's really concerning to me, that this child had somehow internalized that. So also, can I say 2 things? Okay, this time, okay, on my one pass. Moving down here from Boston was very significant. People always used to say, oh, Boston is so racist. And we'd think, oh, it doesn't seem like that to us, until we moved down here. And then we just realized how clueless we all were. And how, in retrospect, I realized how separated we were, because my Quaker meeting up there held a workshop of to make us more racially sensitive. And they brought in, I think it was a white man and a black woman, this was like a whole weekend workshop. And I had been very active in gay rights, gay marriage, and had been through trainings about telling our personal stories. And that's, I mean, that has been a very significant way that gay rights have been achieved. And so that's where I was coming from. And when we had a break, I went up to the Black woman and I said, you know, I think a lot of us are clueless and we just don't understand what your experience is. And if maybe you could tell us some personal stories. And she said to me with the most venomous voice, I'm not going to bleed for you. And I stepped back. I mean, I was so shocked and I thought, wow, this is a lot of hostility. She's got a lot of rage. And so that's hard to come over, you know, get over for both sides. So I think it's a very, very complicated problem and there's not one solution and not easy to predict.
Yeah. Agreed.
So I'm going to take a couple steps back, I guess, to Jennifer Solomon and maybe Tish, the idea of the prejudice within groups. Again, going back to my South Florida experience, the high school I taught at was a third white, a third Black, and a third Hispanic. However, that third Black, a lot of them were island Blacks. And the trouble you had there was the Blacks from this island hated the Blacks from this island.
Oh, wow.
And then the Hispanics that were from different islands, same thing. But then not only did they hate this Hispanic from this island, they also hated the Black from that island. And so it was, you know, even, and I was like really saying, you know, look, you're a third Black and a third Hispanic. If you can get rid of all that other stuff and get together, you'd actually be the majority here. You know, because when you looked at the school government, you know, the student body government, it was all white. And it was like, well, why? And there was no problems, at least outwardly, between the whites and the other two groups. It was the other two groups within themselves and against that other group and all that. Unfortunately, that completely changed a year later. But that's a different story. Going back to one of your comments was the idea of what is racism. I have a background where I've done a lot of study, a lot of workshops and that type of stuff. Academically, the definition, if anybody cares, is racism is prejudice plus power. So only in this country, only whites could be racist. Anybody else is prejudice because they don't hold the power. Now, I get into a lot of arguments with that because not everybody goes by the academic thing. They go by the, cultural definition, which is anybody who hates another race. But again, going back to there's own, whenever I'm asked to fill out an application or my voter's registration, if they ask me what my race is, I always write human.
Yeah. Yeah. We're probably getting close to time to move on to refreshments. So Fred, you're the boss.
What time is it?
It's a quarter till.
Quarter till? We can do a few more. I'll make a.
Jen has a really nice refreshment table. So
Yeah,
I
no,
don't
we'll get there. I
cut
can
that short.
smell it standing here.
Yeah, my
Smells
stomach's
delicious.
growling.
I can make a brief comment on my definition of racism, and that's the failure, the abject failure to understand another person's humanity. And that's, to me, a fairly simple thing.
Well, to jump off of that before I get to what I was saying, I tend to think of racism having a certain amount of irrationality to it, which goes kind of beyond prejudice, is that essentially for no reason whatsoever, you have this attitude, hatred against someone who does not look like you. And so there's a touch of irrationality. But this brings to the point is that in any of these discussions, one has to define their terms. That specific definition. I've been in conversations like this because I've said, it depends, Black people cannot express racism toward whites. because there's no irrationality to it. There's a justifiable fear, and you don't know who you can necessarily trust. And that fear is beneficial because it contributes to survival. And so if I look at a white person and says, I don't want to talk to him or anything like that, then that is not necessarily irrational because I don't know what their ideas or attitudes may be or whether or not they're going to be a threat to me and my family because of the history of this country. And so those terms have to be defined. Now, can Black people be racist? Well, yeah, to whites in this country, I don't necessarily buy into that because of that definition. We thought in the 70s that if all the old white guys died off, that that's when we dropped the ball. Actually, is when I've looked past it, because we used to say the same thing, because in the 70s the country seemed to be going in the right direction. All sorts of policies and laws were being passed, programs were moving forward, and all we thought was we had to sit back, and if once all the old white guys died off, then everything would be hunky-dory because all of us young people that were progressives and came out of the 60s were going to carry this ball forward and be done with all of this. We see that didn't exactly happen. I've had to deal with race on a number of occasions, not just being an African-American, but my daughter is mixed. And try to teach your child about racism when basically her relatives and friends didn't demonstrate anything necessarily that Black people experience, and trying to arm her for the world that she was going to come into. That can be difficult because you don't want your children to be irrationally afraid of people. You want them to be able to go out there and flourish without all of this baggage. And so in discussing this, it can be complicated, but I don't think it has to be. I think there's some very concrete things that can be done to address this issue, rather than getting caught up in the weeds as it often does, and becoming more of a can't see the forest for the trees type of thing. Because even as I listen to it here, it starts to fly off and spin off, confusions about prejudice versus racism, tribalism even becomes a part of this thing. And so I think we have to really remain kind of concrete in discussing this and in addressing how it can be corrected or, solved.
All right, last, okay. Atish.
I'm going to
and
sit down
then-
because I'm getting tired.
All right. Gordon hasn't made any comments yet. We're going to pass the mic to Gordon.
Okay.
While we're having
So since George Floyd, I've seen a lot of new stuff on PBS mainly, movies, programs, Black issues that I hadn't seen prior to George Floyd. So that's a positive move, I think. But it turns out that if you look at now, there's more awareness of anti-Jewish sentiment floating around. So it's almost as if there has to be a background level of hostility and hatred, because we are a scrappy lot. If you look at history, we've always been a scrappy lot. And so, if that's true, that we have to maintain, or there has to be a background level with genocides going on generation after generation, maybe more genocides than ever, there has to be this recognition that, man, we're a scrappy lot, and we're not going to get over it because it's inherent in our DNA, perhaps. So stop dreaming.
All right, I'm going to call an end to questions, answers, and comments and move on to announcements. which I just turned the mic off, which was silly. Does anyone have announcements? Who, raise your hands, please.
Trying to get my papers out. First, I want to thank those people who contributed to our holiday giving project. We had a limited participation. We got about 12 or so items that will be very useful to the residents of the IFC and their Home Start and Community House residencies. There was a liaison meeting this past week. They've got a lot of new people at the top, and so some of this is information for them as well as getting information back. And they're pretty desperate for blankets and sleeping bags and coats because of the coming winter weather and increase in homelessness around here. So some of these programs are for people who are in the community. They may not even affiliate with IFC, but they're there and they need help. And so these items, if you have gently used, mostly men's coats, I think, the blankets or the sleeping bags, they can use that stuff. And anytime you have something, if you bring it here, we'll make sure it gets over there. But we had over a dozen items ordered or purchased for this. And so I thank you all very much. I had something else.
If it comes to you, holler and we'll go back. Announcements?
I'm getting ready to put together the schedule for the next quarter, set up greeter, refreshments, open closing words, and then our board members for MC and board member in charge. So please get in touch with me of any dates that you're not available for those of you who do want to help out.
I have an announcement. Sorry, Jennifer. We're having a board meeting immediately following today's meeting at about 3:30 or 20 after or so. If you'd like to, if you're curious about the secret inner workings of our meeting, you're welcome to join us to pry open the cover on all that mysterious stuff that goes on.
Thank you. Just the final pitch for Change for Change for today, and then we'll get a new organization in the quarter. I will announce that in the new year. But this last pitch for Stronger Together, an organization that helps promote young girls and supports them in navigating this world. The founder has been asked to come and speak, so hopefully we'll get some dates soon. So y'all can hear from the founder of Stronger Together.
Maura.
You all may realize this, but it bears repeating. Do not come here next Sunday. We will not be here. The doors will be locked. We are not having a program next Sunday. However, we are having a program in person here on New Year's Day. Are we still doing that? I thought originally we were going to be talking about predictions and things. Because we did that last year. The first program, people added some things and we talked about it. Maybe I have remember this wrong. But we will update you and let you know what the program really will be.
After our board meeting, you all check your email and we'll figure it out. Is this an announcement? All right.
Well, I got my BA COVID shot Thursday and they do work. So get your shots. That's my announcement.
COVID. All right. Well, I am going to introduce the speaker for closing words, oddly enough. That would be me again. And so closing words is also a poem This one's short. It's only about 400 or 500 lines. And so I'll just launch right into it. Be lion mettled, proud, and take no care, who chafes, who frets, or where conspirers are. Macbeth shall never be vanquished until great Birnam wood to high Dunesane hill shall come against him. There's a moral in there somewhere. All right, thank you. Now, I'd like to thank